Hey guys, what's going on? I think I'm live. I hope I'm live. I hope we're live. Anyway, so this is something new we're trying, guys. This first webinar is going to be free here on YouTube, of course. Aaron and I both had some presentations we had put together in the past, creating this UFO timeline, dating all the way back to the 1800s. So we decided to compile them into one large presentation and present it as a webinar. And we realized like a lot of the stuff we take for granted, we always talk about, we understand it, but a lot of our audience doesn't. And this is going to be a video that you'll be able to share with people who don't know much about the subject. And we're just going to paint this picture and just show everybody what we already know and how they've changed the narrative over time, and how what they used to tell us and what they're telling us now are completely different. So a lot of this information that we're about to cover, a lot of it most people know, a lot of it some of you guys might not know, but some of it is pretty surface level compared to some of how deep we actually get on this channel. But
it all ties together, though. It's all important,
right?
Like that's the thing. It all ties together.
It all ties together, but
it paints a good big picture of what's going on. You know, even the surface level stuff like helps with that.
All right, you guys ready for this? We put a lot of work into this, hours actually.
Yeah.
So I'm sick of UFO disclosure. This is something that this is the whole reason we decided to do this, because we realized bullshit that we're being fed right now, the narrative we're being told right now, they're trying to erase history. They're trying to erase everything we know about UFOs and ETs that's been happening since the 1800s. And I was like, I could put together a timeline and like debunk all this current shit that they're saying now. So that's what we did. So we're sick of UFO disclosure, and here's why. You guys have seen this meme. We sound like crazy people trying to explain to people that this stuff is real, especially to the flat earth pushback that we have now, which is really interesting. You know, who would have ever thought that we would be fighting a narrative that space doesn't even exist and the earth is flat and we're all screwed? I mean, essentially. And then we all know this already. And we're here to rewrite history. So we have never been alone. That's what you guys need to understand. This is something that there's evidence dating back to, I mean, as far back as you want to look in ancient times. We didn't start in ancient times. We started in the 1800s, but you've seen ancient aliens. If you've traveled the world, you know, the monuments, the statues, the megaliths, the hieroglyphs, the petroglyphs, the pictographs, everything's there to depict ancient aliens. So at least we know that the presence has been here for a long time. Just to debunk the flat earthers. So this has nothing to do with UFOs, but I found it interesting because when we're putting this timeline together, there's a lot that takes place in Antarctica. And if Antarctica is an ice wall, like we're being told by the Flat Earth Society, you would have to disregard all of this information, but there's so much evidence here, both can't be true.
Right.
The first sighting of Antarctica is now widely acknowledged to have taken place on the 28th, maybe the 27th of January, 1820. During the voyage of two Russian ships, the Vostok and the Mirny, the explorers circumnavigated the continent twice in an attempt to map the landmass as accurately as possible. So they circumnavigated the continent twice to map it out as accurately as possible. And obviously there's a lot of different contradicting history on the discovery of Antarctica. Either way, we know it exists. And if this is true, these guys could not have circumnavigated an ice wall to map it out.
Right.
All right. So now a lot of people aren't aware of the coming race. A lot of people are, but in 1871, this book was written called The Coming Race, Vril, The Power of the Coming Race, Proto-Occultic Theories and Darwinism. It's narrated by an American who stumbles on an underground race descended from the ancient Aryans that's harnessed a source of infinite power called the Vril. So this is important to remember as we go on. So it helps make sense of some of the stuff we're about to get into. But you need to understand that the Vril is an infinite source of power. The Coming Race is a novel. Published in 1871. Some readers have believed the account of a superior subterranean master race and the energy form called the Vril, at least in part. I'm not going to read all that, but the main reason I posted this is so we can understand that There's evidence of a subterranean master race that some call the Aryan race that was discovered in the 1800s by the Germans. And this book was written, and the Vril is a source of power that's within our Earth. That's an infinite source of power. It's like a 0-point energy.
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay, so that's 1871. Moving on to 1890. If you guys are familiar with the book Shining the Light, which Aaron just happened to be synchronistically guided to, you can tell them a little bit about the book if you want.
Yeah, I found it randomly in a bookstore here, in the metaphysical / paranormal section. I just grabbed it, started flipping through it, and it just had tons of disclosure in it. Essentially, there's like an insider in it that's like just giving all this information, and bought it, read it. It was amazing. I'm like, Tyler has to read this. Gave it to him.
Right, you can't put it down once you start.
It blows your mind. Yeah,
I was on the airplane recently, like I was so tired. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to read this, and I was like wide awake, glued to it.
Yeah.
But they talk about in 1890. So we hear about the Granada Treaty that was signed with Eisenhower and the Greys, but in 1890, this talks about the shadow government ET alliance being formed all the way back then.
Mm-hmm.
And they say a group of 9 ETs called the POTAS. Now, the reason he...
Okay, can I do a quick side note?
Yeah.
So the what we call the Cabal or the Illuminati or whatever, that goes back way before 1890, actually. But I think what this is referring to is the ET alliance, like the reptilians or the Greys or the negative ETs that first formed an alliance with that group in 1890.
Absolutely.
So that we're not saying that group started in 1890, just to be clear.
Right. But the reason that it's spelled out like this in the book is he explained that we don't have an English way of saying the actual name of this race. So he spelled it out, but he said there's no actual way to say it in our language. So I would just say the POTAS, the X, make the X silent. I don't know how you want to pronounce that. It's up to you. But they made an alliance with the U.S. shadow government in 1890, apparently a group of 9 ETs. They gifted the U.S. a satellite / space station that has been parked here for over 105 years at that time. So in 1890, they claimed that they had been here for over 105 years observing us. And they felt it was a good time to intervene. And that's when they made an alliance with our shadow government. And in the book, they described this as a bribe. So this was their end. This was a way to get their foot in the door and start, pulling the strings behind the scenes.
And also, another note, this is only book 1 in a 7-book series. So there's actually 7 of these books.
I didn't even know that.
And the later the book, the more expensive they are used, I guess, because they're like book 1 and 2 are relatively cheap. But once you get past that,
and
they get more expensive.
There's always the argument that, this can't be proven, but there's no paper trail for any of the stuff, a lot of the stuff that we hear about. We're lucky to have this information in a book. So just use discernment, guys. Like, just because we're presenting this doesn't mean that this is absolute fact, but this is a source that's telling us this. And at this point, we can't ignore any information. We need to do our due diligence and connect the dots ourselves because we're being lied to. So essentially, the U.S. government was manipulated into working with these groups in exchange for a highly advanced space station. And this space station was used until we finally developed our own in the 40s. And this was the beginning of the infiltration. All right. So then after 1890, we started having the Zeppelins show up, and I'll let Aaron talk about this.
Yeah, in the 1800s, particularly in the 1890s, people started seeing these mystery airships all over the place. There's different terms: Zeppelin, dirigibles, airships, all kind of interchangeable terms. And at least in the US in the 1890s is when they were really widely seen and reported. And a lot of them were definitely like we were building them, and they were normal kind of craft, but in the 1890s there were ones that were farther advanced than the ones that we were building on the surface, so, and those started being reported. And by the way, these in general were being reported by thousands of people, and they were very widely seen. But then these more advanced ones started being seen, and they were landing in the US, and people were getting out supposedly speaking German out of them. So there's things that point to that being the Germans' very first like space program that they were developing all the way back in the late 1800s. And here's a clip of David Wilcock talking about that. I was actually in the crowd during this talk.
This is just a short clip.
Yeah, this is from Contact in Desert 2018.
And I hope you guys can hear this. I don't know how this is going to come across audio-wise, so this will be our first test.
The Illuminati folks were trying to build a space program. And so they started with dirigibles. In the late 1890s, there were all these airship sightings. People were having dirigibles, these flying balloons with motors on them, a lot more advanced than anything we saw out in the open, landing, and people coming out who were speaking German and talking to people just randomly landing. And now it's like, oh, it's a UFO sighting. No. This was their early space program.
So yeah, that was just David Wilcock talking about that. What year was that presentation?
2018. I was actually in the audience during that. I was at Contact that year. So
okay, so we have 1890. We have an ET alliance, shadow government, ET shadow government alliance. In the 1890s, we have these Zeppelins, these dirigibles showing up with German speaking people coming out, approaching the Native Americans. So we know that there's some sort of technology already. Obviously, what the U.S. was doing and what the Germans were doing were two completely different things back then. But either way, this is more evidence of a very early space program. And then we know in 1901 and 1911, the Germans visit Antarctica. They spent 2 years each visit. So in 1901, they were in Antarctica for 2 years, and the same goes for 1911. But what were they looking for? Why were they going there so early? The official reason was for scientific exploration. The team consisted of zoologist, botanist, physician, bacteriologist, geologist, chemist, meteorologist, and an expert on terrestrial magnetism. They established a base in 1901, and then they returned in 1911. So this, what you're looking at here, is actually a copy of National Geographic magazine, August 1901, that talks about the Germans visiting Antarctica back then. So we have record, we have evidence here that the Germans did this. This isn't just hearsay. And I would love to get an actual copy of this to be able to read it. But regardless, we have to wonder what they were doing in Antarctica. Obviously, we think they were looking for a good place to set up shop, or they were making deals with reptilians. I mean, who knows at that time exactly what was going on. So then we have the story of Karl Haushofer. In 1909, if you guys don't know who he is, there's a lot of information on him, even on Wikipedia, but the Journey to Planet Serpo book talks a lot about him. But in 1909, so he's a German politician who travels to Japan in 1909 and is invited into the Tibetan monastery of the Society of Green Men, aka the Green Dragon Society, which is a faction of the Black Dragon Society. This is where he learns of a 5,000-year plan to take over the world in 1909. And these societies claim to be channeling a subterranean reptilian race that lived underground in Tibet. So they were getting information from this underground race of reptilians. Obviously, this is why they named their societies after them, the Dragon Society. For some reason, Karl Haushofer was given permission to go over there and learn of this 5,000-year plan. He said that the Green Men decide that an alliance with Germans would help them reach their 50th century goals. So there was already a plan back in 1909 being made with the humans, the Germans and the reptilians and the Green and Black Dragon Society to take over the planet, to take over the Earth. Karl Haushofer comes back with the gift of foresight and tales of an underground reptilian civilization. They gave him the gift of foresight so he can go back to World War I, and he impressed everyone. He was able to tell them what was going to happen next. To sum this up, because we have a lot to get through, he eventually becomes Hitler's handler, and he grooms Hitler into power. And the interesting thing is that Hitler ended up taking over. Hitler, I guess his ego, his own greed, consumed him. And he ended up, even when he created the concentration camps, he actually put Karl Haushofer and his family in the concentration camp, the very guy that even made Hitler who he was. And apparently Hitler became so power hungry that he actually foiled their plan. And he was actually pissed off a lot of the reptilians and everything, because he was kind of going off on his own at this point.
He went rogue. Basically.
He went rogue. Yeah. And then there is literature that says Karl Haushofer ended up in Inner Earth, which if I added all that, we'd be here forever. We're going to be here forever anyway.
Yeah. It's going to be a long interview.
Okay, so that's 1909. We know that this all happened in 1909. So we're not even barely into the century, and we have so much already. 1917, Maria Orsic channels UFO blueprints from ETs from Aldebaran, powered by Vril energy. Remember the Vril energy, the infinite source of power that we talked about earlier, that was discovered by the Germans from the subterranean race called the Aryans. And this was the birth of the first German-made UFO. And just a little bit about the Vril Society. So the Vril Society was a secret society made up of 4 women. They claimed to have kept their hair long in order to act as an antenna to telepathically channel communication with alien races. And just a little bit more about them, just because not everyone is familiar with the Vril Society. So the Vril Society is a mysticism physical movement created by Maria Orsic, a medium and founder of the Vril Society, and based upon messages she claimed to have received from ETs from Aldebaran or AlphaTauri, which contained technical data and precise instructions on how to build a super out-of-this-world flying machine, a UFO. The extraterrestrials, Aryan from Aldebaran, told Maria that they were here before thousands of years ago, and people took them for gods. The objective of the Vril was to acquire knowledge about Vril energy through psychic means, and to disclose pertinent information to Thule, or Tool, however you want to say that, in the interest of the Nazi Party. Thus came the development of the Munich device called the, whatever that says, the JFM, Other World Flying Machine. This was the very first Nazi UFO, which was apparently constructed in 1922. And this information, guys, can be found in this book right here, The Aldebaran Vril, 1917 Extraterrestrial Messages to Maria Orsic and the Birth of the First German-Made UFO. If you guys are interested in that book. And next, here's just some pictures of these Hanabu, some of these early models of the Vril flying saucers. Allegedly, depending on who you talk to, some of these are actual real photographs. Obviously, the internet, anything can be fake nowadays, but as far as we know, some of these might be real. And this slide is just for fun.
Somebody says she is still alive. I guess they're referring to Maria Orsic.
Could be, yeah.
She could be. I wouldn't doubt it.
So Hitler had signed treaties with several hostile galactic civilizations and agreed to exchange humans for the alien research of extremely advanced UFO propulsion and particle beam weapons. To exchange humans. So we know about the human trafficking. We hear about the galactic slave trade, the secret space programs. This is early evidence of humans being traded for ET tech. And when humans are traded, what are they using us for? How is it done? What technologies were involved? This is something we have to think about. Early evidence of all the stuff we talk about now. 1929, Admiral Byrd visits Antarctica. This is the first of 5 trips. And we all have heard about Admiral Byrd's diary, which he claims to have visited Inner Earth, had a meeting with their council, came back with a message for humanity. He was told never to talk about it again. That if you read, you can find his diary online. Billy Woodard, who worked at Area 51, claims to have been assigned to reading Admiral Byrd's diary. He was told it was in fact true, because when he read it, he wasn't sure, but that was his first assignment, to familiarize himself with the diary. So did Byrd visit Inner Earth? It's very possible. But why was he going to Antarctica also in 1929? This is something else to consider. And then he establishes Little America in 1929. So it sounds like the U.S. also had plans brewing down in Antarctica at the same time the Germans did. There was a lot more happening there at that time than anyone was aware of. A lot of activity for a plain old boring ice wall. So 1938, the Germans established New Schwabenland in Antarctica. They wanted Admiral Byrd to actually lead the trip because they weren't familiar with the terrain like he was. So they wanted him to help be their guide. He knew what he wasn't in alignment with their mission. So he refused to go, according to what we researched. But he did agree to advise the members of the team. So he was actually advising the Germans before they went to Antarctica officially in 1938, where they set up New Schwabenland, which was named after the research vessel, or New Swabia. Here's a spot on the map of where it would be in Antarctica. This is an old map and you can't see on this map, it's really shitty, but it even shows like a lot of outposts and things that they had set up, at least on the surface, even though we know they were doing stuff underground. And then here is a picture of the vessel, the Schwabenland, that actually went to Antarctica in 1938. The purpose of the mission was to claim an area of land to protect the German whaling industry. That was the mainstream narrative for them going, the mainstream purpose. And okay, so what do we have next? So we're in 1938. So 1939, World War II starts, right after the Germans have already developed New Schwabenland. Coincidentally, a year later, World War II starts. And this is when we hear of William Tompkins' testimony about the Navy spies who were sent over to Germany. William Tompkins served with the Naval Intelligence from 1942 to 1945, directly participating in intelligence debriefings of Navy agents embedded within Nazi Germany's most secret aerospace facilities. So if you've listened to any of his testimony, it's pretty profound what was happening back then. They were coming back with intelligence, talking about the Germans building these amazing free energy UFOs, these flying discs. They were even bringing back schematics and blueprints that weren't even in like an earthly language. They had no idea what it meant. So during World War II, we had a lot of information coming from Germany about their early space program. And then this was the very early days of the US space program, I would imagine. So 1942, this is during World War II, we have the Battle of LA. The Battle of Los Angeles, also known as the Great LA Air Raid, is the name given by the contemporary sources to a rumored attack on the continental United States by Imperial Japan. So there's this whole Wikipedia definition, right? We also have William Tompkins' testimony that tells a different story of the Battle of LA, which he says huge motherships were spotted along with the large mass sighting of unknown aircraft ever recorded. Largest, that's supposed to say largest, mass sighting of aircraft ever recorded. It went on for 5 hours. So basically hundreds of massive naval space battle fleet ships hovering 8,000 feet above the motherships. So what he said was there was these gigantic motherships that showed up over LA, and we had all of our battle cruisers in the ocean firing at this fleet of ships. And then, but he also says that the naval space fleet, there was a naval space fleet from another part of the galaxy that was parked above them that was attacking them from above. So this is from an early, a space program from another part of the galaxy, according to William Tompkins. So whatever these motherships were over LA, they were being fired on from above and below. The Naval Space Armada was obviously from this part of the Milky Way galaxy, but they weren't from Earth, according to William Tompkins. He said the space vehicles were under fire from above and below. And then he says that the area was crop dusted with chemicals in an attempt to erase the sighting from the witness memories. And he goes into details about this, but basically this was an early evidence of chemtrails being used to help to make people forget the sighting that they just saw. So they knew there's obviously, it was written about in the papers, people knew about it, but the mass amount of ships that was actually in the air at the time, they were trying to, I guess, keep a lid on it as best they could.
It basically, in his book, I believe he says like all of LA could see it. And in fact, like most of Southern California could see it. It went on like all night.
5 hours.
Like 5 a.m. Yeah. I think he said in the book. And there were even like deaths from the falling bullets and stuff, you know, because they unloaded just like
Right. The
unbelievable
shrapnel
amounts
that
of-
was falling. I mean, there was like that was actually
right,
killing people.
right.
And he said that whatever they were spraying the area with, he said some people looked like zombies, like they were just completely zoned out, whatever chemical was being pumped in the air. And a lot of people don't remember the details.
And the craft they were firing at was just absorbing everything, did not affect it in the slightest. So
yeah.
So there you go. Like clearly, that was not something known that we can explain that was hovering for hours over LA.
Right. Okay. So
yeah.
So then that was.
But they were firing it. So clearly, like they didn't know what it was, and they thought it was a threat, and they're firing at it. And this just goes to me. This reinforces the compartmentalization of everything, because if you want to say like, oh, all the military knows, it's like, well, they wouldn't have done that if they would have known what it actually was, And so then clearly they didn't actually know what it was, and thought it was a threat, and they're firing at it all night.
And then
nothing happens.
Here's photographs from it, and then here's even this guy's car that show evidence of damage from the sky battle.
You can't say,
right.
And what they try to say, it was just like
they said a rumored attack, by Imperial Japan. So there's so much more going on at that time, but either way, this is 1942. Again, something that gets kind of breezed over sometimes.
Yeah.
And then we have, after that, we also have the Foo Fighters.
Oh, they tried to say it was a false alarm. Like, yeah, we just fired all night, nonstop, used all our ammo on a false alarm. Like, that makes sense.
I'm going to use the restroom real quick if you want to talk about the Foo Fighters.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll talk about it. So during World War II, pilots were seeing these balls of light flying around and following their craft and maneuvering around them in ways that aren't supposed to be possible. And we didn't know what they were, and we were freaked out by it. So we assumed it was the enemy's secret craft or something. And they were nicknamed Foo Fighters, which that name comes from a comic strip that was popular at the time. So tons of our Allied pilots were reporting seeing these things, and most of them thought they were secret weapons of the Germans, or the enemy. They were bright glowing lights, and the U.S. government has still to this day never offered an explanation for what they were. And other than they try to say it must have been weather anomalies, ball lightning, blah, 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 go down the list. Or enemy aircraft just mistaken, for whatever. But clearly, like, these are trained pilots that know how to spot, like they're not going to be reporting. Clearly, they were an unknown. They were UFOs. They were some kind of advanced craft, whether it was ET or whether it was secret. So that was all during World War II for like 4 or 5 years at least, during the war.
And then that is where the Foo Fighters got their band name.
And that's where the band got their name. Yes. Dave Grohl apparently is a big UFO guy.
There's a book out there called Alien Rock. It talks about all the musicians who had their own ET experiences, abductions, sightings. Most of the famous popular musicians have all had their stories, including like Kurt Cobain.
That's right. Yeah.
Elvis, Michael Jackson, the Beatles. They're all in there.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting side note. Okay, so this one is kind of out of the timeline, but I think it's fascinating because it's a real photograph. So this picture was taken by a couple in Carlsbad, California, and analyzed by specialists at Northrop in San Diego, California, and released by William Tompkins. William Tompkins looked at this photo when it made its way to his office, and he knew exactly what he was looking at. This is a close-up image, according to William Tompkins. This is a close-up image of a 900-foot-long reptilian tanker found to be dispensing a mixture of 4 gases over Oceanside and Carlsbad, California. These gases are used for mind control of the population and the disbursement of viruses, aka reptilian contrails. So he says that the people that took this picture they had no idea. They didn't see these in the sky.
Yeah. Do you want to explain why that is?
Yeah, I'm going to.
Okay. Yeah.
So they didn't see these. This just showed up back then when you had to actually go and have your film developed. When it was developed, they noticed these, but they all claimed that they didn't see these with their naked eye. And that was William Tompkins said that they have cloaking technology that keeps us from seeing it. But for whatever reason, the technology that kept cameras from picking it up wasn't turned on or wasn't enabled.
So they had two different, I guess, switches. One that keeps people from seeing the craft, and one that keeps cameras from seeing the craft or picking up the craft. And they forgot to switch on the one that kept cameras from picking it up. And that's how this guy took this photo not seeing anything at all and with his eyes, but then this is what turned up in the photo.
Right. And according to Tompkins, as soon as he saw it, he knew what it was. He called it a reptilian tanker.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that these colors coming out of the back of it are 4 different gases that are used to basically mind control us. So if these things have been flying around invisibly cloaked for years, and I don't know when this photo was taken, I'm sorry, I don't know when it was taken. I'm sure I could go back through William Tompkins' testimony and books and maybe get an idea. Regardless, there's a lot more about this also in his books and testimonies. We're just breezing through this. But it's interesting because as far as anyone knows, these are legitimate photographs. They have not been proven wrong or debunked. So that is a reptilian tanker. And he explains a little more about the craft. He explains what all these serrations mean.
Mm-hmm.
And
you can even see like the different colors in the gas.
Right.
Like, that's interesting.
Right. Okay. So here we are in 1945. After the war, the Germans flee to Antarctica, Argentina. This is when Operation Paperclip happens. We have evidence that the Germans even went to the moon and Mars at this time. Hitler wasn't dead. He went to Argentina as well, possibly Antarctica. So there's a lot of information at this time.
Do we know what year?
No, that's why I said.
We don't know the exact.
Yeah.
Do you know the decade? Was it like 50s, 60s?
I don't know. And
from how that picture looks, I would say maybe 60s, but we don't know exactly. 60s or 70s, maybe.
Right.
But we're not sure.
So all right. So we had World War II happen. Obviously, all the stuff we talked about, the Navy spies discovering what the Germans were up to. And then now in 1945, a ton happens. We have evidence of the Germans, like I said, fleeing to Antarctica and Argentina. And how they were getting to Argentina was the Red Cross that was actually at that time, that building was right next to the Vatican. They created these Red Cross visas, these illegal visas that let Nazis out of the country, and it gave them admission into Argentina through the Catholic Church, where they were given a new identity. They were wiped clean of all their sins and given a new name and a new life, a clean slate to start a new life in Argentina. So the Red Cross was guilty for actually aiding the Nazis in the escape of Germany.
Because the Red Cross was established by the cabal.
Right.
It's not what they claim to be, as many.
Which that information is like, you can even Google the stuff about the Red Cross visas and the Nazis going to Argentina and all that stuff. Apparently, that's where Hitler went as well. And, German secret societies colonized Mars in the 40s, according to information that Dr. Sala has shared. What we're looking at here is potentially a real photograph. We don't know, depending on who you talk to, again, but a swastika-shaped base was built on the backside of the moon, and it was later
built out.
It was later built out and taken over by, I guess, the U.S. space programs, if I understand that correctly. I provided this just to show that the swastika wasn't just a Nazi thing. This showed up all over the world and from ancient times.
That's where they got the symbol.
Right.
It's a very ancient.
Just like everything else, it's been hijacked. The Nazis built a swastika-shaped base on the dark side of the moon between 1938 and 45. Dates vary depending on insider or whistleblower.
What does the swastika look like, though? Look at a galaxy with the spiral arms.
Right.
And then look at a swastika.
Right. I've seen it also depicted like it's the Big Dipper, like in all of the cycles.
Oh yeah,
so there's so many different.
It's representative of
astrological alignments or something.
Yeah, maybe it's representative of all those things.
So again, no one can go to the moon and prove this, but this we do. There's a lot of information that lends to the possibility that the Germans did make it to the moon back in the 40s, maybe even the late 30s, and even to Mars. Which I should have included the Google Mars photos. So in another presentation,
I can pull it.
I don't know if you'll find it anymore.
Oh, really?
You can try.
What should I Google?
Google Mars base, April Fool's prank or something like that.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Sorry about that, guys. So this could be fake, might be fake. Either way, this showed up on Google Mars on, I wish I could pull up my other, oh wait, I might be
It
able.
was like a few years ago. When was it?
In the teen 2000s.
Okay.
Either way, this showed up on Google Mars. They tried to say it was a prank. This is
They tried to say it was an April Fool's joke.
but it actually wasn't found on April at all. It was found like months earlier.
Right. So that doesn't even make sense. Right.
I went back to the exact coordinates of this place on Google Mars, and I found a blotched out square that was completely out of place, like a dark square, which I had the photo in the other presentation, of the exact coordinates of this alleged prank. Regardless, there's no way to prove whether this was real or not. It's interesting though, because
Could be, though.
when you type in the exact coordinates that this came from, you see this big, like ugly square that's just completely out of place.
My question is, why do they have a square that's clearly, they're hiding something with that?
Right.
Kind of like on Google Earth when you find little squared out things,
right?
Like they're clearly hiding stuff.
Right. Okay. So moving on. You guys have all heard of Operation Paperclip. If you haven't, here's a brief synopsis.
Now you will.
Operation Paperclip was a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from former Nazi Germany to the U.S. for government employment after the end of World War II in Europe between 1945 and 1959. Conducted by the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, it was largely carried out by special agents of the U.S. Army's Counterintelligence Corps. Many of these personnel...
Corps. You don't pronounce it.
Corps. Well, whatever. Corps. Yeah, Corps.
Corps.
And many of these personnel were former members and some were former leaders of the Nazi Party. And this is where there's the whole argument that we didn't actually win World War II, because if we did, why would we allow 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians that were leaders of the Nazi Party to come in and infiltrate our infrastructure? Basically, every organization in the United States was infiltrated, and we had German personnel, Nazi personnel. So, and one of those people was Wernher von Braun, who worked for NASA, who headed up NASA.
Yep.
And
a literal Nazi headed up NASA.
Right.
NASA was a Nazi creation. Like that's a historical fact.
And that's what people don't know. And
well,
it's
a lot of people don't know.
And we'll get into NASA here in a little bit because there's a lot to get through still. Okay, so at the same time, Operation, however you say this, Tabarin. So Operation Tabarin 1 and 2, British soldiers discover a German base in Antarctica in 1945. Actually, 1944, technically. So if you guys don't know about this, it's a very interesting story. Most people don't know. This happened right at the end of World War II. So while Operation Paperclip was taking place, the British was actually discovering the German bases in Antarctica. So in 1908, the British claimed a sector of the South Pole in 1908. So they already had a base established down there way back when the Germans were there early. And what they were doing there is anyone's guess. But the British soldiers learned about an entrance to the Nazi base in Antarctica from 3 captured Nazis in 1945. There's a lot more about this. There's an entire book written on this, guys. There's other books that reference this, but we're going to breeze through it and just give you the main bullet points for the sake of this presentation. So a team of 30 men went to explore. They discovered a tunnel system so vast that they had to split up. They discovered massive underground Nazi establishment, U-boat port, and hangars for exotic craft.
There's only one survivor.
There was only one survivor. The team was actually captured, and one survivor made it out and ended up making it back to the British base. And the survivor reported the incredible discovery, and he told them how the others died. So a second team was established. This time they had a more strategic approach, and the results were reported to Truman. So I'm going to briefly read through some of what they discovered. Here's an excerpt from Secret Journey to Planet Serpo. So they followed the tunnel for miles, and eventually they came to a vast underground cavern that was abnormally warm. Some of the scientists believed that it was warmed geothermally. In the huge cavern were underground lakes. However, the mystery deepened. As the cavern was lit artificially, the cavern proved so extensive that they had to split up. And that was when the real discoveries were made. The Nazis had constructed a huge base into the caverns and had even built docks for U-boats. And one was identified. One of the U-boats was identified, supposedly. Still, the deeper they traveled, the more strange visions they were greeted with. The survivor reported that hangars for strange planes and excavations galore had been documented. For 5 hours, they explored for 5 hours. They entered an enormous cavern illuminated by artificial lighting. In his account, the SAS agent says, as we looked over the entire cavern network, we were overwhelmed by the numbers of personnel scurrying about like ants. But what was impressive was the huge constructions that were being built. From what we were witnessing, the Nazis, it appeared, had been in Antarctica a long time. He says he was very impressed by the advanced Nazi technology. The team was discovered and fought a heroic engagement while being chased after setting the mines in place. So they actually blew up the entrance. They came in, and this is talking about the second mission back, the second trip back. So they they were discovered on the second one, and only 3 survived that time. So only 3 survived the encounter, but they had succeeded in detonating massive explosions at the mouth of the tunnel and sealing it so that the entrance remained sealed. After being evacuated to the Falkland Islands, the 3 survivors were told that their mission was to remain top secret. So the SAS agent says, upon reaching Georgia, we were issued with a directive that we were forbidden to reveal what we had seen, heard, or even encountered. And apparently this is what prompted Operation Highjump. So clearly the United States did find out about Operation Tiburon, either by covert intelligence operations or by deliberate intelligence sharing by the British. The latter seems more likely because the British were probably convinced that they had not succeeded in destroying the base and wanted the U.S. to finish the job. So that's where Operation Highjump comes in.
So the whole purpose of Highjump was to finish destroying the Nazi bases in Antarctica. It was not, but the cover story was it was an exploration mission only, which is BS. Like it makes no sense to send what they sent there if it was an exploration mission.
So then that was so we have Operation Tiburon 1 and 2 in 1945. The British discover a Nazi base. That intel is leaked to President Truman, who then orders Admiral Byrd to lead Operation Highjump in 1946. And you can read this if you want.
So it said Operation Highjump's 46, 47. So publicly it's supposed to be an exploration mission. In reality, it was to take out the Germans' base in Antarctica. So it was supposed to last 6 months. And they came back after only 2 months because they got their butts kicked, because little did they know the Germans had very advanced technology, advanced craft that we to that point knew very little to nothing about. And so we show up trying, hey, we're gonna take out their base, and there's these flying craft come out just destroying us basically. So when he came back, Admiral Byrd, they came back after only 2 months, way shorter than it was supposed to be, with way less people, the people that survived. And Admiral Byrd was interviewed after that and gave a statement. He basically said he was freaked out, and you could tell, because he's like, oh crap, if they have this kind of technology, we're defenseless against this. Like, they could take over the world if they wanted to, essentially. And this is a quote.
Well, I have the actual full quote in the next slide.
Okay, yeah. So craft that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds, because that's what he witnessed. So
46 to 47, Operation Highjump, 4,700 Marines sent to Antarctica, confronted by UFOs. They ended 4 months early. And I just had to add this part just for the flat earthers. Admiral Byrd encircled the continent in 2 different directions before the attack. How do you encircle an ice wall?
How do you encircle an ice wall? Right. You don't.
These are all of this information we're sharing is the type of stuff that either flat earthers don't know about, or they just choose to ignore when they're creating their theories. And we're not here attacking flat earthers.
Unless like the ice wall would encircle the whole planet, unless you're saying they like went along the entire ice wall. I guess you could say that. But
just
that
an interesting side note, when I was reading, they specifically said that they encircled the continent in 2 different directions before the attack. So here is the actual quote. Admiral Byrd declared today that it was imperative for the United States to initiate immediate defense measures against hostile regions. Furthermore, Byrd stated that he didn't want to frighten anyone unduly, but that it was a bitter reality that in case of a new war, the continental United States would be attacked by flying objects which could fly pole to pole at incredible speeds. So that's interesting. Here we have Byrd reporting back on the exact technology we just got done explaining that had been developed since the 1800s.
And the interesting timing is that what was shortly after that.
Well, that's what we're getting at.
What we're gonna get
in 14. So that's when Byrd, on March 5th, 1947, that came out in the newspaper, that he actually said that. So that's when it made it to the papers. But before we get there, this is something little known. Immediately following Highjump the next year, Operation Windmill. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, was a follow-up, much smaller exercise the following year. An important part, which was to obtain ground references for the 70,000 aerial photographs taken during Highjump the previous year. Helicopters were used extensively, hence the name Windmill. So that was the public reason for going back in 1947, was to go get ground references for the 70,000 aerial photographs taken during Highjump. That means there are 70,000 photographs out there of whatever happened.
A lot of photographs
that we have never seen. But knowing what actually happened, they weren't going back to just get ground references for the photos. This mission, who knows what the real purpose for this mission was. Either way,
they're trying to find out exactly what the Germans had in Antarctica,
right?
Extensively. Like they're trying to, like, we need to know exactly what's there.
And this is when the UFO starts showing up over all the nuclear facilities. In the 40s. They start showing up.
Yep.
And this is just important to know. We'll get into some more specifics on this a little later, but just mainstream science recognizes that there's at least 12 measurable dimensions, depending on which scientist you subscribe to. So either way, they're admitting that dimensions are real, that dimensions exist. And we have information out there from a lot of people that say when you let off an atomic device, you're killing people in other dimensions that you can't see. Maybe ETs know something that we don't.
It's not just affecting our dimension, it's affecting many other ones. So they're not going to allow, it's for multiple reasons that they're not going to allow us to destroy ourselves, us to destroy the planet, and us to destroy and affect beings and many things in other dimensions that we know nothing about. So we're kind of like these little ignorant children that are playing with machine guns,
right,
and bombs that we have no idea what we're doing. And they're like, we're gonna stop you guys.
And every planet is connected via the cosmic web, which is a portal system,
right?
And the effects of that atomic blast will travel through that portal system and affect other planets as well. Yeah, not just other dimensions, but other planets. So that's why they're parking above these facilities, shutting them down, because this isn't just about destroying ourselves. We have no idea the implications of letting off an atomic bomb.
So the good news about that is that there is not going to be nuclear war, because it's not going to be allowed. And they've been, for decades and decades, they've been shutting down nuclear facilities and stopping us from using nukes.
Right. So whenever we hear that narrative,
so that's just fear mongering. Whenever they're putting that out in the media, you're like, oh, nuclear war.
Thanks, Tyler, for the inconvenient info. Sorry.
The inconvenient info.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
sorry for the inconvenience.
We need to know this. Yeah, sorry.
He's just laughing about it.
Okay.
It's Greg Herrera. Okay, so next, we all know about Roswell, which Aaron went into extensively.
Yeah.
For the sake of people who don't know it. But before Roswell wasn't the first UFO crash. These are just some of the documented crashes. In 1938, at the invitation of Benito Mussolini, German scientists were allowed to examine the remains of a UFO that was recovered in 1933 near the small town of Maderno in northern Italy. So we have evidence of a UFO wreck in 1933 in Italy that was allowed to be examined by German scientists in 1938. which is interesting to note because of what we knew what was happening back then with the Vril Society and the Carl Haushofer information and all that. So then in 1941, the U.S. Navy found a disc in the Pacific west of San Diego, another wrecked UFO. There was a UFO crash that's not very well known about here in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, about an hour and a half
south of here
from us.
Yeah, really
in 1941. Close. There was also another crash in before Roswell in 1947, a UFO crash in the plains of St. Augustine, New Mexico. And then, do you want to read this or I can read it? Doesn't matter.
I'll read it, yeah.
So this is information about the crash in Augustine, New Mexico, 1947, May 31st, before Roswell.
Yeah, so the alien craft was resting on its roof, still smoking when the military arrived. 4 aliens were on the ground, 3 alive and 1 dead. Bob Shell, the former editor of Shutterbug magazine, and the military cameraman assigned to film the scene, reported that each of the live aliens was tightly grasping a box and making shrieking noises. He said they looked like circus freaks. 2 of the 3 surviving aliens were injured and died within 3 weeks, at which point the cameraman was called upon to film an autopsy of one of the creatures in Fort Worth, Texas. This ultimately became the famous Santilli autopsy film, which we'll talk about later. As can be seen in the film, these aliens appeared almost human, although smaller, and had 6 fingers and toes on their otherwise human-looking hands and feet. The alien craft and bodies were taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio.
Right. So we have evidence of a wreck with actual alien bodies before Roswell, May 31st. Roswell happened in June. There's another UFO crash in Aztec, New Mexico in 1948, where they recovered a UFO and 16 of its occupants. And we'll get in, there was actually a photograph from that wreck that we'll get into in a later slide. But apparently that wreck had a lot more witnesses than Roswell, and there's a lot more information about the Aztec, New Mexico wreck. And actually right here, they're not going to be able to see it because of
unless you switch back to
I'm not going to because it doesn't matter. What I'm holding here is a soil sample from the UFO wreck site in Aztec, New Mexico. This was gifted to me. I actually had the MUFON lab investigate this, analyze it, and they found very, very little traces of radiation.
Yep.
But that's it. Other than that, it's pretty much just, soil.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a soil sample from that wreck site, allegedly. So this was gifted to me by somebody very synchronistically. And I actually just had a dream about this soil sample last night, which was interesting. And here we are talking about it. I had a dream that someone tried to come steal this, like it was some really important
Top
evidence.
Secret thing, yeah.
And then, so this is the difference between Aaron and I about Roswell. So this was my slide about.
Well, I mean, I'm like that about Roswell too, but
right.
I wanted to go deep into it. Still.
So we all know about Roswell, but Aaron makes a great point on why we need to actually dive a little deeper, because there's a lot of smoking gun evidence because so many people have been researching it for so long. There's almost undeniable.
There's just so much evidence and so much information on it that if you just research that one crash, that one incident, it will prove to yourself. You can prove to yourself that it's ET. It's not from here, and it happened. It's not what they're telling us.
Well, you can fly through,
and that there is a cover up in place and all that. So it's a really good, especially for people that don't know about any of this stuff and have no clue about any of this stuff. Just tell them to research Roswell and come back to you, and their mind will be blown if they actually truly research it. So anyways, Kenneth Arnold, this was before Roswell a little bit. In 1947, he was a pilot. He reported seeing 9 objects glowing bright blue-white flying in a V formation over Mount Rainier in Washington. He estimated their flight speed at 1,700 miles an hour, which is way, way beyond anything that is supposed to be possible. Said they moved like a saucer if you skipped it across the water. And that's where the term flying saucer came from, because the newspapers then mistakenly reported that he saw flying saucers, when in fact he just said it moved like a saucer skipping across water. Initially thought they were military aircraft test flights, but the military later said they hadn't been conducting any tests during that time, so they couldn't have been. All right, so now we're getting into Roswell. July 3rd, or that date's not exact, it's somewhere around that time. when the crash happened, but it was discovered at that date or around that date by a rancher named Mac Brazel on a ranch about 75 miles outside of Roswell that was close to Corona, New Mexico. So he noticed that his sheep weren't crossing a part of their grazing land. They were stopping, seemingly for no reason. He didn't know why. And he investigated it, and he found all this strange debris. He found metallic debris spread along the hillsides and a huge gouge in the earth. The pieces of metal that he found were pliable, very light, and they reverted back to their original shape after you could crunch them into a ball and they would revert back to their original shape. So clearly this is some advanced,
not memory foam, but memory foil.
Right. This is in 1947 too. So think about that. Some had odd markings on them that he couldn't make out what they were. He took samples of a lot of this debris into town, into, I believe, Roswell. It was on July 6th, presented them at the sheriff's office. 2 deputies were immediately ordered to the crash site to investigate. And so the next day, the Roswell Army Airfield made a public statement saying they recovered the remains of a flying disc. And they said that exact thing. They said flying disc. So there were many rumors regarding the flying disc. Became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chavez County. Major Jesse Marcel and Captain Sheridan Cabot followed Brazel back to his ranch to inspect and collect the debris, which they took to the base July 8th. And Marcel said it was nothing made of this earth, which, by the way, he said many, many times. He would reiterate it was not from this earth. It was an alien, craft. So he was convinced that it was not from here. So as reported in the Roswell Daily Record on July 9th, Brazel told Sheriff Wilcox that he might have found a flying disc, who told the RAAF, who sent the intelligence officer, Major Marcel, and a man in plainclothes to his home, where they picked up the rest of the pieces of the disc and went to his home to try to reconstruct it. They failed. This case is unique because the media broke the story after getting. So, by the way, this is from Jean Broida, our friend Jean Broida's book, Unknown Objects. This is a direct.
We had her on the show.
We had her on the show a few years ago. She's awesome.
An excellent researcher.
She is. Yeah. And this book is amazing, by the way. You can get it for like $5 on Amazon, by the way. This case is unique because the media broke the story after getting a U.S. military press release. When the newspapers and other broadcast media began spreading the flying saucer story, the Air Force then retracted its official statement and issued a contradictory cover story. There's also evidence that eyewitnesses were pressured by government agents to suppress or change their stories, which of course they were. Yeah, that's pretty obvious that happened. So before he visited the Roswell Daily Record on July 9th, Brazel had already given 2 interviews. So one with the Roswell radio station KGFL announcer Frank Joyce on the 6th, and then probably the next day on the 7th by Walt Whitmore, who owned that station. And he made a wire recording of Brazel's uncensored story and intended to broadcast it, but that never happened thanks to the U.S. military. The interview was meant to be aired as a scoop, but was never played on air. Unfortunately, the recording has been lost to us because it was confiscated by the Army on the afternoon of July 8th and never returned during their operation to kill the original disc retrieval story and remove all contrary evidence. So they wanted to squash this whole disc story, all the evidence. They wanted to anything they could do to cover it up, threaten people, go down the list, say it was a weather balloon. So here's a photo of General Ramey holding a piece of paper in his hand. And for the longest time, no one could read it. No one could make out what it said until now with advanced, with our technology now, we were able to enhance the photo. And here's just part of what we're able to make out it says now. And the victims of the wreck and the disc they will ship. So clearly talks about a disc and a wreck. And here's the full thing,
which just kind of
says disc many times and wreck and things that if it was just a weather balloon, it wouldn't say basically. And clearly it was a disc of some kind, and it was a wreck, and it was very important. So we know those things for sure.
And when I first read this, I thought it said Dick Craze continues, but it says Dick.
It does not say Dick Craze.
It says disc.
Disc Craze.
So the UFO wreckage was taken by the military. It was swapped out with weather balloon wreckage.
It was swapped out with actual weather balloon wreckage because they needed to fit that cover story. So they actually swapped out the wreckage, gave that weather balloon wreckage to Major Marcel here in this photo. And that's what he's holding in the photo. And you see the look on his face, like, are you serious right now? Like somebody's barking orders at him. He's looking up at him. And the press is laughing at him because they can't believe a U.S. military intelligence officer somehow didn't know the difference between a crashed UFO and a weather balloon. But of course he did. He was threatened and silenced, and he couldn't say the truth.
Here's a quote from Marcel himself.
So here's a direct quote from Marcel later on. This is actually from an episode of In Search Of. All I could do is keep my mouth shut. General Ramey is the one who told the newsman what it was and to forget about it. It was nothing more than a weather observation balloon. Of course, we both knew differently. So he says they both knew differently. So General Thomas Dubose was the highest ranking Air Force officer with direct knowledge of the Roswell case. He went on record about the weather balloon cover-up, plus other important details about what was really happening in General Roger Ramey's inner circle. However, he was relegated to the role of a complete non-entity in the 1995 Air Force Roswell report, even though he was General Ramey's chief of staff in 1947 and had a great deal to say about what happened in recorded interviews and his affidavit. The Air Force didn't even identify Dubose in the photos taken on July 8th, 1947, which they reproduced in their report, picturing him with General Ramey. Why the cold shoulder from the Air Force for this high-ranking officer? Well, quite simply because Dubose's statements contradicted the Air Force party line. He stated there was indeed a cover-up ordered from Washington. He said he personally took the phone call from General McMullen and that the weather balloon debris shown in the photos was not what was found at Roswell. It was indeed a cover story designed to get the press off their backs and put out the fire. Dubose insisted that even he never saw the actual Roswell debris, meaning that what was pictured in the photos was not the actual material covered near Roswell. And this is a quote from his affidavit. The material shown in the photographs taken in Major General Ramey's office was a weather balloon. The weather balloon explanation for the material was a cover story to divert the attention of the press. And this is a memo from the Dowd Field office to the FBI. Like all memos to the FBI at that time, it was addressed to Director J. Edgar Hoover, recorded in the FBI records. Subject of the memo was anything but ordinary. It related a story told to one of our agents by a third party who said an Air Force investigator had reported that 3 flying saucers were recovered in New Mexico. The memo provided following detail.
3 of them.
3 of them.
So there's a lot of information. There was more than one wreck.
There was more than just one, right?
Right.
The saucers were described as being circular in shape with raised centers approximately 50 feet in diameter. Each one was occupied by 3 bodies of human shape, but only 3 feet tall, dressed in metallic cloth of a very fine texture. Each body was bandaged in a manner similar to the blackout suits used by speed flyers and test pilots. After relaying the informant's claim, the saucers have been found because the government's high-powered radar in the area had interfered with the controlling mechanism of the saucers. So that's supposedly why they crashed, because the high-powered radar interfered with their controlling mechanism.
I'm going to catch you up.
Yeah, sorry, I messed up there. No further evaluation was attempted concerning the matter by the FBI agent. Yeah, so that
right. And then here, these are 3 different books that, tell you everything you need to know about Roswell.
Yeah, so the first book there is the first one ever published on it in 1980. Made a strong case for the Roswell crash having been a UFO, not a weather balloon, due to the nature of the recovered materials, their wide dispersal, and the behavior of the security conscious military. And there's been many books published since, and those other 2.
So the Roswell incident, the day after Roswell, and witness to Roswell. And it's interesting. This is the one that, MUFON is still stuck on. They talk about this all the time. They can't get past it. Obviously, there is a lot of smoking gun evidence here. And maybe that's why MUFON is stuck on it, because they're evidence-based.
MUFON, yeah, because MUFON they're definitely more evidence-based, more nuts and bolts. And they're kind of like, their prerogative is more to like prove that UFOs are a real thing to the public, to the mass public.
Right.
So they kind of tend to get stuck on Roswell, get stuck on documents.
But
we kind of 3D.
I guess we realize not everyone knows all the details of the Roswell story. So
it's important still.
Right.
It's important to look into.
Right. And then 1947, it's interesting. We have Operation Tiburon and Highjump, then Roswell, 1947. Same year in September, right after Roswell, the Majestic 12 was formed. And according to David Wilcock, Carl Sagan was originally part of the original MJ-12. And you can tell what you know about that.
So Carl Sagan apparently was a part of MJ-12 secretly. And he actually knew about UFOs. He knew they were real. He knew ETs were real. He knew all this stuff was going on to a certain degree. Everything's compartmentalized. He knew a certain degree of what was going on. And it's funny because on the surface, publicly, he was a big debunker of UFOs and tried to make it, oh, there's no evidence and blah, 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 and that's because he actually wanted to come out with this information. He wanted to say, hey, this is real, blah, blah, blah. But obviously they're not going to allow that. The cabal isn't going to allow that. So they threatened him. They silenced him. They said, no, you're going to say this. And he became a puppet. If he ever wasn't, he was a puppet of them. And he was only allowed to say what they wanted him to say, essentially.
And then here is, according to John Lear, the John Lear report in 1987, which we'll get into in a little bit here.
Yeah.
Majestic 12, MJ-12, or Magic are all forms of the code name for the control group authorized by President Truman on September 24th, 1947. The director of the CIA is the director of the Majestic 12, MJ-1. The control group was formed to oversee a top secret research and development and intelligence operation and was responsible only to the president, President Truman. The need for this group was dictated by the finding of a downed flying saucer scattered over 2 sites near the town of Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947. The dead bodies of 4 very small human-like aliens were also found. Majestic 12 is the most highly classified secret in the United States, and its existence has never been divulged to Congress. The funds for MJ-12 and Aquarius are CIA confidential. Now, this was written by John Lear in 1987, but that's a very great description of what MJ-12 was and what it was created for. So then this is like the birth of the black budget programs. As far as the United States is concerned, this is where all the cover-ups begin. This is where also we have the overnight advances in all the technology. Oh yeah, these are 2 photos. Well, 1 photo, just different filters of the wreck in Aztec, New Mexico in 1948. So we have Roswell, we have Majestic 12, and then in 1948, immediately we have another down saucer with 16 occupants this time. And there was more witnesses this time. And as far as we can tell, this is an original photograph. There's a lot happening back then, guys. And then fast forward to 1952, where we have the White House flyovers. Allegedly, these were Nazi discs. They didn't know at the time that they were the Nazis. Maybe they did, but they weren't telling us.
Somebody knew. It's compartmentalized.
Right. Yeah. So here's a photograph. This is a newspaper article. And then this is your slide if you want to read it.
Yeah. So 1952, the invasion of Washington happened. A series of UFO sightings over DC in July 1952, accompanied by radar contacts at 3 separate airports in the area. So 3 separate airports picked up unknown objects on their radar all at the same time. So they knew something was flying around in the sky that they didn't know what it was, and jets were literally scrambled to go after them. And this is all historical fact, by the way. And then after all that happened, obviously the jets were scrambled, realized they were no match for whatever these things were. And then, of course, the cover-up has to happen after that. The Air Force tried to claim the radar blips were merely caused by temperature inversions, and the visual sightings were merely meteor stars and city lights, nothing more. Nothing to see here. Move along.
And William Tompkins, Dan Cooper, a couple other people, both they claimed that these were the Nazi discs. They were the Nazis.
That seems the most likely. It's like it was like a show of force by the Nazis to say, "Hey, we can fly in your most restricted airspace right over your capital."
Basically, calling their bluff.
You can do nothing about it, kind of thing. Like as like, hey. Right. We have this technology. You guys better do what we say. You better, submit to us, kind of.
And then the 1950s saucer craze begins. Yeah. So, and then this picture here to the right with these girls, part of the Flying Saucer Club, Like that's just funny to me because there's these groups all over the place now, but back then I'm sure this was like a really exciting thing to be a part of.
Right.
The Flying Saucer Club. There was comic books. I mean, movies were being made. It was everywhere. And then 1952, right after all this happened, this is when Project Blue Book was established, and the National Security Agency was also established in 1952.
They hired J. Allen Hynek, college professor.
And this is a definition of Project Blue Book from John Lear's report. It was the U.S. Air Force project established to determine whether UFOs pose a threat to the security of the United States and to determine whether UFOs exhibit any unique scientific information or advanced technology which could contribute to scientific or technical research. Project Blue Book was not quite so successful in its secondary mission, which was to publicly explain away the UFO phenomenon as natural or known phenomenon. The secondary mission, it was decided that it was an outside commission of distinguished scientists would be convened in order to permanently lay the issue to rest. After the study was completed, the Air Force state the continuation of Project Blue Book cannot be justified. So either way, this here is coming from the John Lear report in 1987 that says Project Blue Book's secondary mission was to cover up the UFO phenomenon, but they were unsuccessful
because so many people were seeing UFOs at the time. It was getting out of hand. It was like everyone was seeing these things and like, what are these, and reporting them, and they're like, we need to squash this. We need to come up with a scientific explanation to explain, these are just weather anomalies. These are weather balloons, swamp gas, ball lightning, go down the list. And anything possible other than an unknown object or a ET craft.
And the show, by the way, the History Channel show, Project Blue Book, was really good.
It's a really good show. I highly recommend watching.
And they were canceled after 2 seasons because the third season, they were getting into the natural portal system that was all over the planet. And like one of the guys gets lost in the portal. So the third season was supposed to be them like discovering this portal system. And then obviously that's when they shut it down. They don't want us to know about that.
Right.
So they were discovering portals. I mean, this is so far beyond UFOs.
So quick note. So they hired J. Allen Hynek he thinks they're hiring him to actually investigate this stuff. And he's a non-believer when they hire him completely. He thinks UFOs are fantasy, not real at all when he gets hired, but he still thinks they're hiring him to actually investigate. And he thinks what he's going to find is that there is nothing behind these because he doesn't believe in it. But what actually ends up happening is he ends up realizing like, wow, a lot of these are unexplainable. There is something going on here that we can't explain. I need to look more into this. So he starts getting more and more and more intrigued and like a believer in UFOs that, hey, there's something
in his own integrity. He couldn't go against he was going against orders. Basically.
And they're getting mad because he's wanting to tell the truth of what hey, this is unexplainable and we need to investigate. And they're like, they basically straight up have to tell him, we hired you to explain this away, to cover it up, not to come up with something as an explanation, not to actually tell the truth or actually investigate it.
So 1952, Blue Book and the NSA were established same year. Interesting.
Yep.
We know what Blue Book is now. 1954, this is the Eisenhower ET meeting. The Granada Treaty was signed. Allegedly, it's signed every 10 years, but there's a lot of controversy around this. First of all, remember how we started this presentation in 1890. We have information that says there was a possible shadow government ET alliance established then in 1890. So this wouldn't be the first time this is happening. This would be the first time it's happening with one of our presidents in the know. So this isn't necessarily the shadow government, even though it is, but we have President Eisenhower involved in this. There's controversy. So essentially, it's an agreement made between humans and the Greys that allowed for the abduction of humans by ETs in exchange for advanced technology. Allegedly, the deal was made behind Eisenhower's back, yet he became the fall guy. A lot of people think that Eisenhower was responsible for this, but I don't think any president actually has that much power. This was all being done by the military and these agencies behind his back.
It was done completely behind his back. He had nothing to do with it.
A complete list of abductees was to be given to our government in an effort to keep tabs on who was being taken in exchange for the technology. But the Greys, the Mitra in specifically the Mitra, I believe, who were the ones signing this treaty, did not hold up their end of the deal. And as many claim, this was the beginning of the ET takeover within our government. So there's that. What did I say that was? I'm already 1954. Yeah. And then right after that, 1955, Operation Deep Freeze. Here we are back in Antarctica. The United States, along with New Zealand, the United Kingdom, France, Japan, Germany, Norway, Chile, Argentina, and the USSR agreed to team up and go to the South Pole. All of a sudden, now we're all friends. The goal was to advance world knowledge of Antarctic weather systems, glacial movements, and marine life. I call bullshit. Again, this was commanded by, guess who? Admiral Byrd.
Hey, what do you know?
Here is a photograph from this pole that was installed to commemorate Operation Deep Freeze. As you saw on the last slide, there's actually a patch. So the plane on the patch, and that pole is also on the patch. This pole is on the patch, and you see all the flags, all the nations, the country's flags behind it. But to the bottom right here it's a real photograph of the plane, the U.S. Navy making their first landing at the South Pole on October 31st, 1956. So this was a deep freeze mission. So we're back in Antarctica. What's going on down there? Just want to see how the wall's holding up, I guess. So what exists in Antarctica? According to multiple insiders, Antarctica is the central hub for space operations on the planet, along with ancient pyramids, ancient ruins of advanced civilizations, 3 massive UFO wrecks under the ice, stargates, alien bases, tunnel systems, entrance to inner Earth.
Oh, inner Earth.
Yeah, typo. Spaceports, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You name it, it's down there, according to every whistleblower, every
whistleblower ever,
right,
that knows anything about it.
And there's tons of information out there on that. So then we have so that was 19. Well, so let me go back. So deep freeze was, it actually officially ended in 1999. So that's still continued until then. And then, but in 1955, it was developed. In 1961, we have the Betty and Barney Hill UFO abduction.
Yeah. So this is a very famous UFO abduction, Betty and Barney Hill, September 19th, 1961. This is a couple. They were driving home to their home in New Hampshire, I believe it was. And they claimed they saw a huge flying disc on their drive home, and they had all this missing time and these kind of strange things surrounding that. They later claimed they were abducted and medically examined by small extraterrestrials. And the physical evidence absolutely corroborates their story that was found. There were magnetic anomalies on their car, strange unknown substance on Betty's dress, and a star map drawn by Betty attempting to recreate the map shown to her by the ETs. And so she drew a map of Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 in 1961, which was well before this was public knowledge at all.
But you forgot the most impressive part. They drew the map as if they were viewing it from the other side.
Yeah, they drew it as if they were viewing it from the other side.
Not from Earth.
Not from Earth, also.
Right.
So not only was it not public knowledge, and there's no way she could have even known how to draw this map, but it's from the other side of it from Earth. So clearly there's something going on there. And yeah, as I said, we did not have the data to make such a map in 1961, nor in 1964 when she drew it. So it could not be a hoax.
And during this time, Project Serpo, or Project Crystal Night, which we're going to get into, was being developed. And this is actually, President Kennedy was aware of this. So there was which I'll get into in a minute. But so the same year as Betty and Barney Hill, Betty and Barney Hill, President Kennedy sends out a memorandum called the Kennedy Directive, a memorandum on the need for greater coordination of regional and field activities of the government. So basically, this is when he was starting to learn about all these secret programs, all of the 3-letter agencies, and he wanted everything compiled under one organization. He thought it was spread way too thin, too compartmentalized. The left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, and he was made aware of this mission that was going to planet Serpo. He was also made aware of a lot of other things. So he thought, as president, he had the power to, well, let's just bring all this together and work together. Mm-hmm. Well, that's when they decided to kill him.
Of course.
you can't do that. But it's interesting to note that 1961, the same year as the Barney Hill, that happened. And then we have another UFO incident in 1965.
Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. It was a mass sighting of a falling brilliant fireball, and it was reported over 6 U.S. states and Canada, dropping debris and causing sonic booms, followed by a cordoning off of the probable crash site, alleged intimidation of a reporter by Men in Black, and cover up and the unresolved death of said witness.
Right. So somebody was died trying to report.
And there's an
alleged,
I guess, not the actual craft, right? But,
right, like
that's like a
model of
what it was. So it had some kind of strange markings on it, like
so while that was happening on the surface, we have Project Crystal Night, or Project Serpo, taking off, leaving Earth. 12 astronauts going to spend 10 years on an alien planet 240 trillion miles from Earth. Kennedy had knowledge of this mission, which is part of the reason he implemented that, which obviously failed. But in 1965, he was aware of this. And if you guys haven't read The Secret Journey to Planet Serpo, if you listen to our channel, I always talk about this book. There's a lot of information here. A lot of some of it's not really verifiable, but if it is real, if any of it's real, it's pretty impressive. And we have,
highly recommend that book.
So
to everyone.
And actually, so the 12 astronauts were supposed to spend 10 years, but time worked differently on that planet. So they thought they were gone for 10 years. They were actually gone for 13 years. And so they spent 3 years there longer than they actually wanted.
Yeah, they had a lot of trouble gauging time because the planet
had two suns,
and their years different, and like
their days were different.
It kind of puts into perspective, like
they're watching any device they had to tell time did not work on that planet.
Right.
And then they also discovered genetic experiments, cloning facilities. I mean, there's a lot they discovered on that planet.
Mm-hmm.
So then we have another, so 1967, right after that, we have UFOs at Maelstrom Air Force Base, which you can read that.
Yeah. So this is the Air Force Base in Montana. This happened March 16th, 1967. UFOs disabled 16 to 18 nuclear missiles. By this time, UFOs had been regularly showing up around Air Force bases, hovering and flying around, vanishing and reappearing, and shutting down nuclear facilities and disabling them since the 40s, at least. They were never hostile or violent, though. But they made it clear that they could disable our missiles anytime, and there was literally nothing we could do about it.
Right.
So,
and
that's
for
been
good
going
reason,
on for a long time.
So 1967, and then guess what happens? 1968, Apollo missions begin. Funding for the SSPs is what I like to say, because a lot of that was a cover. The funding for NASA, I mean, it did go into the surface level moon missions, but a lot of that funding gets funneled into the programs. And even NASA didn't know they were lying to you. So why I say that is because there's a lot of evidence about the moon landing footage being faked and filmed by Stanley Kubrick in a studio. And I mean, it's damning evidence. It's pretty much verified at this point that there was moon landing footage filmed in a studio here on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people think that means we didn't go to the moon, but
we did. It was both.
But it was both.
But there were a lot of things found on the moon.
Everything's so compartmentalized. Even NASA didn't know they were lying to you. So
why did we stop going to the moon? Why do you think?
According to some people, even NASA at mission control, like even that was all set up for mission control. They were being shown fake footage as well.
Right.
Everything, even they can't be in on it because they have to sell it. So they have to believe in
how compartmentalized things are. It's extremely compartmentalized.
So now this is when we get into William Tompkins' testimony. So this is actually a drawing of what William Tompkins claims to have witnessed himself, the actual footage of the moon landing. So we have the little lunar rover here in the middle with 2 astronauts next to it. And then you have 6 gigantic craft surrounding the crater's edge. And then you have some other object in the sky here. Maybe that's Earth. I don't know what that's depicting. But here is what Tompkins claims. This is coming from his book, Selected by Extraterrestrials, Volume 2. Tompkins claims to have witnessed firsthand classified live feed from the Apollo 11 lander. So there was a classified live feed that wasn't being shown to the public. The Apollo missions were just the foundation for the deep space exploratory interstellar missions, according to Tompkins. He said the Apollo missions were planned by the Navy and the think tank at Douglas Aerospace years before NASA was ever created. This wasn't something that they just, like Kennedy was like, oh, we need to go to space. Let's create NASA and go. Like, this had been a plan for decades that the U.S. Navy was in on. They were developing in think tanks in Douglas Aerospace. Kennedy was given permission to go to space publicly but by who? William Tompkins says by who? The space race was on. Tompkins was confused because he knew about the secret space programs already. He knew he had this technology. He had been developing and drawing out the plans for these space fleets that we had been using in our secret space programs at this time, or at least the development of them. And he was confused that they were going to the moon in the public eye under conventional methods. So he understood what we were watching was some sort of show. This was some sort of propaganda for the space race against the Russians. This was a political stunt, basically. Tompkins says, we have extensive naval communication stations all over the planets and moons in our solar system and other solar systems, and we are still expanding. In 1969, all communications between the astronauts and mission control were censored and classified above top secret by the CIA. So we have to consider that everything we saw and heard from the moon landings was staged footage. We were watching a movie. Then they were reading us a script. So here's one more quote from William Tompkins. I was privy to watching the uncensored TV and audio feed from the moon landing in a private studio in LA. What I saw was that upon the landing, the astronauts first donned Masonic aprons, descended from the lunar module, and placed a Masonic plaque and a Masonic flag on the surface of the moon, essentially claiming it for the Freemasons.
Yeah.
They observed 6 large vehicles perched on the crater's edge, overseeing them. Armstrong shouted, "They are huge, sir." So there's a lot more about this in the book, guys, but for the sake of this presentation, I'm just kind of breezing through the bullet points.
Quick side note, when you look into NASA, literally everything they do is an occult ritual, is a Freemasonic occult ritual, because that's who the people running NASA are. And again, the occult doesn't mean bad. It means hidden. It's hidden secret knowledge, but the cabal has this knowledge and they use it for negative. They use it for control and enslavement, blah, blah, blah. And that's where, they've hijacked Freemasonry, and goes back to Knights Templar, and goes back, to the Egyptian mystery schools and Babylon and Sumer, and,
Right.
Anyways, all that to say, Freemasonry is not bad inherently. That's not what I'm saying. Most Freemasons have no idea about any of this. They're good people. But the people running it at the very top of the pyramid are these people that are also running NASA. And NASA, everything they do is an occult ritual.
Down to the symbolism, down to their logos. Yeah.
To a T. Like, look into it. And there's a really good book on this called Dark Mission by Mike Barra and Richard C. Hoagland. We have it upstairs. I highly recommend that book, Dark Mission. And it reveals all of that, and it reveals a lot of all the NASA cover up everything, basically.
So
yeah,
right. So then the Armstrong, they were told by the ETs that humans were not welcome to the moon and they must leave. That's why we didn't return publicly. There's a lot more to that story, but that's in a nutshell. That's what happened. And this comes from Tompkins. One last thing from him: aliens have built hundreds of moon structures, most on the backside, so ancient people living on Earth could not see the constructions. And of course, the aliens have built extensive facilities, not just in caverns like those that cover the entire inside of the Earth, but many cities on the backside of the hollow moon, is what he calls, William Tompkins says, the hollow moon. And he says a lot about our moon. He said, first of all, it's not our moon. Second of all, it's not a moon. It's a space station. It's hollow. It's extensively built out on the inside and on the backside. Even some on the front side that are cloaked, apparently. So 1968, NASA goes to the moon. 1969, Project Blue Book is closed. I wonder why. They have a new cover up now.
Right.
They're distracting everyone with NASA.
They don't need it anymore.
They don't need Blue Book anymore. It's not worth the funding, which we know it probably didn't actually get shut down, but renamed, rebranded. Either way, publicly it closed. And then shortly after that, in 1972, the Apollo program officially closed. And apparently the reason for that was because of what actually happened on their first encounter to the moon, even though humans have been on the backside of the moon for far longer than we've ever been told. And
Right.
then the famous 1975 Travis Walton sighting. You could read this one there.
Yeah. So Travis Walton, he was just a logger. He was like, how old was he? Like 18 when this happened. Reports being abducted by aliens for 5 days. So he was logging with a crew of like 6 or 7 people. I forget. Six people. Six, I can just read it on there. Yeah. 6 people and just normal guy. And they all see this bright burning thing. Like they don't know what it is. They think the force is on fire or something. They don't know what it is. And then they get closer and they realize it's like a craft that's like glowing. And Travis just starts walking towards it, and the rest of them are just like, "What are you doing?" And they're trying to yell at him and come back, and he's like drawn to it, and he can't stop. He's just walking towards it, and then the craft takes off. And basically, when the craft took off, is when it knocked him back, and it either killed him or it like just very badly injured him.
Well, what they say is apparently what he says.
I forget what he says
that
exactly.
He got caught in like the tractor beam.
That's right.
And they weren't trying to hurt him.
They weren't trying.
So when they took off, he got caught in this like tractor beam essentially. And then after they got so far away from the planet is when he fell to the ground and they injured him.
And he was injured.
So they actually abducted him to heal him. To heal him.
Right.
Despite what the Hollywood movie tells you. So yeah, he claimed.
So he was missing for 5 days during all this because they took him aboard their craft to heal him, but he was gone for 5 days, and then the whole town thought those guys murdered him or something, and he shows up 5 days later, like naked and confused and scared. And so yeah, the ETs on the craft healed him. There was physical evidence that was discovered that corroborated the story. And to this day, Travis Walton still speaks at UFO conferences and tells his story. Has not changed in the entire time.
He's actually speaking at one coming up this summer.
He's speaking at one coming up still. I actually met him. There's a picture of me with him at Contact in the Desert in 2018. The one year I went to that, I got to talk to him for about almost an hour, and he's a super down to earth, awesome guy. Like he's a very genuine, honest guy. Like he's not doing this to be famous or make money. He's just not, he's just telling what happened.
Story.
He's just telling what happened to him.
And I was just on a road trip in the Southwest, and I actually drove through this town that it happened. And we saw, the whole town is like UFO and ET themed now, like kind of like a mini Roswell. But it was interesting to drive through the town. So that was 1975. Then 1977, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And according to
Steven Spielberg
and some other I think who was president at the time?
Carter. Yeah, that was right.
So anyway, at the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when 12 astronauts are boarding the craft, that was direct disclosure of Planet Serpo. When 12 astronauts left, they were just like telling the public. And that movie was filmed on a military base that even Steven Spielberg had to have like clearance and access to get onto. And like one day he forgot his badge. They wouldn't even let him on the base. And he's like, "I'm the director." And they're like, "It doesn't matter."
Yeah.
He had to go back to his hotel. But the interesting thing about the script of this movie was it was allegedly written in 3 days, which never happens.
Which is insane. Never happens.
All by Steven Spielberg in his hotel in 3 days. And there were no rewrites.
Yeah. Which also never happens. And according to who you talk to, the end of this movie was disclosure of the Serpo mission. Yeah.
So then that was in 1977 while the people were still gone. They had not yet returned from Planet Serpo. In 1978, the Serpo team returns. There was debriefings. They were actually held in basically a prison. Each one was separated. They were individually debriefed. They had to stay there for like a year. They were actually treated very poorly. None of the promises were held up. They had been made promises. Eventually, all of them ended up dying of radiation poisoning.
Yeah, they were radiated very.
Yeah, none of them, and not all of them returned. A few of them actually decided to stay and live out their life on that planet.
Mm-hmm.
But again, 1978, you'll notice we have another jump, just like in 47 after Roswell. We have all these overnight advances in tech. Same thing happens in 78 when the Serpo team returns. And again, guys, read the book. Like Matthew Morney in the chat was saying, it's a great book. It really is. And then 1980, this is going back to William Tompkins in his book Selected by Extraterrestrials, Volume 2. William Tompkins says that the U.S. Navy's 20 and back program began. So, and he also goes into talking about all the age regression technology that we had. And I actually had a video clip saved that I wanted to play that has been scrubbed from the internet, where William Tompkins was talking about how they were age regressing people. And he said even a lot of the major corporations on the planet have access to this technology, and that technology is used by the CEOs and some of the elites on the planet. But either way, we have evidence of at least the Navy's version of the secret space program, 20 and back, starting in 1980, according to William Tompkins. 1980 is the same year when Captain Mark Richards was framed for murder because he wanted to start disclosing the secret space program. Carrie Cassidy did 12 interviews, some with his wife. Some of the interviews she actually had to go visit him in prison to get. You can go check out all those interviews on Project Camelot. I recommend it. There's some incredible information. But here's a little bit about Mark Richards. For over 30 years, Captain Mark Richards has been and still is a prisoner of war between on and off planet races that have dominated Earth for centuries. He is an honorable officer of the Navy who, because of his rebellion against the Dracos and Reptoids, the Luciferian Alliance, is considered a threat to their operations. In 1980, he was framed for a murder that he is accused of having masterminded while he was on a mission off planet in service to humanity. He was captain of a Starship Enterprise type of vessel fighting a war against aliens bent on to take over the planet. So he wanted to defect. He wanted to start disclosing this stuff in 1980. He was not in alignment with what he was being asked to do anymore. And they framed him for murder, and he's been locked up ever since. There's an incredible testimony there.
Yeah.
If you guys have not heard that. Now we have secret space programs.
12 interviews.
Right.
That's yeah.
Secret space
crazy.
programs well underway. 1987, that's when we have the John Lear report.
Year I was born.
December, and I actually have this report if you want to look at the tiny little thumbnail at the top. This is an actual report, apparently from 1987, December 29th. I don't know if this is one of the original copies or what, but this was gifted to me, and the guy who gave it to me couldn't tell me how he obtained it. Regardless, there's more disclosure in this 87 report than anything we've gotten in the past 10 years publicly. And in the first page of the report, this is just something interesting to note. He said, the government of the United States continues to rely on your personal and professional gullibility to suppress the information contained herein. Your cooperation over the past 40 years has exceeded our wildest expectations, and we salute you. So we've been basically cooperating, not really unbeknownst to us, but definitely they've got us under control, guys. Not for long, but.
And yeah, that's rapidly changing. Yeah. So John Lear, he's a big whistleblower. So John Lear says there are at least 70 different species of aliens. I think there's way, way more than that, but he's speaking from his personal knowledge. There's 70 that he knows of personally. Little green men, as well as little gray ones, who are about 4.5 feet tall. Nordics, which are similar in appearance to humans, but are taller and have blonde hair, blue eyes. We've all heard about those. It says that one of those species was recovered from a crash and was stored on ice. Claim that there are good and bad aliens, and they have all kinds of ways to interact with humans. Believe that everything started with the Roswell crash in 1947. I would disagree. I think it started, there were crashes before that, and it started before that, but, that was the big one. He claimed that in September 1945, President Truman established MJ-12, Majestic 12, and the purpose of that was to study the saucers and cover up the existence of UFOs. He told George Knapp, that 4 alien bodies were recovered from a crash and were autopsied by Dr. Detlef Bronk. They were named EBEs, EBE, which stands for Extraterrestrial Biological Entities, and 3 live EBEs were captured in different crashes. EBE-1 lived with an Air Force colonel between 1949 and 52. The EBEs were kept in an electromagnetic facility called YY2, which was designed by Eric Wang, who worked under Dr. Kissinger and was involved in the cover-up of the incident since the beginning. Lear said the reason they have to create an electromagnetic facility is the fact that the EBEs are so advanced they're at least 500 million years advanced from us and probably more. So that's pretty mind-boggling to think about. And they can also disappear, but they can't move by thought through an electromagnetic facility. So the only way to contain them, they had to build an electromagnetic field like facility to contain them.
Isn't that what Mary Beaver just explained, what was built around that giant she saw?
That's right. So there you go. There's corroboration right there. So they built this facility. There was two, one in Los Alamos and one either in Edwards Air Force Base or at the test site. Lear discussed the existence of extraterrestrial beings at Groom Lake, Nevada, also known as Area 51. He stated that there was still a living extraterrestrial biological entity known as EB3. There was a tape of an interview with this being. However, Lear did not see the tape, unaware of what language was used in the interviews. He also mentioned that he had been given 25 secret CIA memos on his trip to gather information. One of the memos mentioned EB3 wanted to see the ocean and that the arrangements needed to be made or the EB would disappear again. Knapp asked if these beings can exist among us and if they need a special environment. Lear said that they have a special environment, special air, and can only last about 20 minutes on Earth's air.
There's tons of information from John Lear.
Yeah,
and
he's a wealth of information.
Exactly. And this is a little more information on John Lear. He says Lear claims that this area is no longer in U.S. control. The aliens have taken over the area. The U.S. government, this is talking about Area 51, the U.S. government then made a deal with the aliens in which the aliens could control a segment of S4 and abduct as many people as they want in return for their technology. And it kind of goes into
and then they discovered they're abducting way more people than they agreed to. So they didn't hold up their end of the bargain. And a whole bunch of scientists were killed. The deal was broken, but the aliens stayed and were abducting as many as 1 in 10 Americans. As many as 1 in 10 Americans, 10%. So think about that. To use in experiments, mutilating these abductees, producing androids in underground laboratories. Sometime in the 1980s, the government and the aliens got together again and are working together so that the U.S. can gain some more alien technology. Lear claims there's a secret U.S. government that's overseeing the abductions and that the abductees have implants in them that control them so that when an ideal time came, the secret government could enslave them and control them via drug addiction. The head of the secret government would be MJ-12. So this is the cabal that we talk about, the deep state, the secret government. It's all the same. They created MJ-12, so that's a part of them. Lear's sources were Paul Benowitz, Bob Lazar, and later on Bill Cooper.
Right, and then Bob Lazar came out in 1989, claiming to have been hired to reverse engineer ET technology at a secret site called S4 just south of Area 51. Claims he examined an alien craft that ran on an antimatter reactor powered by element 115, which at the time had not yet been synthesized. Claims to have read U.S. government briefing documents that described alien involvement in human affairs over the past 10,000 years. And what's interesting, I just talked to Jim Goodall. I just synchronistically met today, and we're going to have him on the show. But he is friends with Bob Lazar, and he was friends with Bob Lazar before he went to work for Area 51. And he told me just today that Bob Lazar didn't believe in aliens or UFOs at all. Actually,
he made fun of it. He ridiculed it before.
So John Lear, Bob Lazar, and Jim Goodall were hanging out actually, and Lear left, and Lazar told Jim, he goes, man, I feel bad for Lear. I feel sorry for Lear. And he's like, why? He goes, because he believes in that UFO crap. I'm a nuclear physicist. It's not possible, blah, 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 blah. He goes, you couldn't pay me enough money to convince me that UFOs are real. He said that was before he went to work for S4. Right. Jim Goodall said when he came back, he was a completely changed man. And now here he is. He can no longer deny. So he went from being...
So it's funny because the mainstream likes to debunk him and and make him into like, oh, he's just a crazy UFO. He just wants to be popular and sell his crazy stories. But here you have actual, I mean, to me, it's spoken word proof that he was a huge skeptic that made fun of this stuff, that wanted nothing to do with it. And now you're going to say somebody like that is now just going to start making up stories about like publicly, putting his reputation,
and then this is the autopsy that Aaron mentioned earlier.
Santilli autopsy film. Yeah. So this came out in 1995. It was obtained by this guy in 1992 named Ray Santilli. So he released it up to 33 countries. He was a British entrepreneur. Claimed he got it from a retired U.S. military cameraman while he was trying to obtain archive footage of Elvis Presley. Footage was released. He released it in 1995 when he sold it to TV stations across the world. Of course, the government claimed it was fake, of course. And so this was examined by this guy named Nikos Alexikos, who was a biologist and a medical researcher, along with multiple professors. And they found that it's definitely not human, and it couldn't have possibly been a fake for various reasons.
And this is part of the autopsy memo. A leaked memo was obtained by aerospace billionaire Robert Bigelow from Eric Davis, one of his physicists. The memo says that Kit Green, a CIA scientist, was briefed 3 different times during and after his tenure at the CIA on topics relevant to UFOs and the Roswell incident alien autopsy. After Kit left the CIA, he was called into the Pentagon by a person in uniform. This person showed Kit the alien autopsy photos and reports, etc. The photos of the alien cadaver Kit saw were the cadaver Kit saw. Is that right?
Kit is his name.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Yeah, Kit Green is his
name. The photos of the alien that Kit
cadaver
saw,
that Kit saw were consistent
with the cadaver seen in the 1995 Santilli film video. Kit was asked to professionally evaluate the material provided to him at a particular briefing.
Kit Green gave a professional evaluation of the footage in January 2001. Stated in his report, the alien autopsy film video is real. The alien cadaver is real, and the cadaver seen in the film is the same as the photos that he saw at the 1987-88 Pentagon briefing. Linda Moulton Howe said those words from Dr. Kit Green about the authenticity of the 6-fingered, 6-toed human dissected after retrieval from a 1947 UFO crash. It is confirmation that the Santilli film is real. It is important. I would agree with that. Green said that he had previously seen an authentic alien autopsy years before the film was released, and that it was the same as the alien autopsy film released by Ray Santilli in 1995. So he's saying he saw that footage before that film was released, and it was the same footage.
Right.
That's what he said.
And then we have Phil Schneider in 1995. The mysterious death of Phil Schneider, the man who revealed the conspiracy of the U.S. authorities with the aliens. So less than 6 months after Phil Schneider came public, he was found dead in his apartment with a piano string wrapped around his neck. Rumors immediately spread that it was a military-style execution. Also, Phil's body was in such a state that people close to the investigation let out that apparently Phil was brutally tortured before his death. However, the official cause of death was suicide. By the way, Phil Schneider suspected from the very beginning that he could be killed if he let it out. He repeatedly told family and friends that if they were ever told he had committed suicide, it would be untrue and that it would be murder. Phil Schneider understood that by his revelations, he angered many powerful people, and they would definitely take some action against him, as a result of which he would be killed. This next photo is graphic, but this is Phil Schneider's hand. If you guys know his testimony, he was in a laser fight with some ETs while they were drilling for an underground tunnel network.
Look at his hand. You can just see something crazy.
Right. So he claims to have been shot in not only there, but in his chest, a couple other places with this laser, and he was rescued. There's a whole testimony there. It's incredible. There's actually a documentary on Amazon Prime all about Phil Schneider. I highly recommend looking at it. So these are key points from Phil Schneider's message. If you don't know who he is, these are 8 things that he said of significance. According to Schneider, by 1995, there were 131 active secret underground bases in the United States and about 1,477 underground bases worldwide. Each base cost an average of 17 to 19 billion in 1995 money and took 1 to 2 years to build using advanced construction techniques, including vitrification and rock melting using lasers. Schneider stated that these bases are huge and contain thousands upon thousands of soldiers and service personnel. 2, this is the second point, magnetic levitation trains connect all bases in the United States, and a huge transportation system is capable of incredibly high speeds. He claims that there is a whole other world down there, filled with both humans and alien life forms. 3, Area 51 is actually a complex of 9 deep underground bases, home to more than 18,000 workers whose lives are highly regulated and completely classified. 4, in 1954, The United States government signed an agreement with aliens, giving them permission to conduct experiments on humans and animals in exchange for technology. So he says also animals, which he also talks about the cattle mutilations. This agreement, known as the Treaty of Granada, is a well-documented event. The original terms of this agreement stated that only a small number of people could be kidnapped and they needed to be returned where they were found, and their memory of the incident should be erased. The aliens also had to provide a list of people they were abducting. However, after a few years, it became clear that the aliens took many more people than they initially agreed. 5, there are 11 different alien races on Earth. Now, that was according to Phil. Like we tell you guys all the time, everything's compartmentalized. But as far as he knew, there were 11 different alien races on Earth at that time in 1985, and 2 of those are benevolent. 6, the New World Order and alien plans are one and the same. Schneider describes the alien program as a complete takeover of this planet, resulting in the death of 5/6 to 7/8 of the world's population by 2029. Obviously, the alien takeover will mean that a single world government will be created, and in all likelihood, this will be the end of freedom as we know it. He was saying this in 1995, guys. 7, at least 9 races of alien beings view humans as a food source. However, this does not mean that they are all cannibals. Instead of actually ingesting human flesh, they use the secretions of the glands of humans and animals to prepare a mixture of vitamins added to their food. And some alien races can get a high, like drugs, from the adrenaline withdrawn from human bodies.
And what does that sound like?
Exactly.
Something we know about.
And then number 8, 16 days before his public appearance, Schneider was attacked by someone he identified as an FBI agent. This man wounded Schneider in the shoulder, and in response, Schneider shot and killed him. But when he reported this directly to the FBI, then Schneider was told that they did not know anything about that. However, after the report, he was attacked at least 11 times, according to him. He also claimed that the government agents tried to kidnap his daughter, but these attempts were unsuccessful due to the heroic actions of his wife.
Do you know what's the name of his documentary on Amazon?
Type in Phil Schneider documentary on Amazon Prime. I don't know, actually. I'm sorry. Deep Underground. That's it. It's called Deep Underground Military Bases.
It's called Phil Schneider Deep Underground Military Bases.
It's worth every second of it.
Post a link in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. So that was 1995. Then 1997, we have the Phoenix Lights incident, which here is a photograph. They tried to describe them or explain them away as military flares. So lights and craft of varying descriptions, mostly notable a V-shaped pattern, were seen by thousands of people between 1930 and 2230 Mountain Standard Time in a space of about 300 miles from the Nevada line through Phoenix to the edge of Tucson. Many reported the lights floating for a while, then accelerate away at high speeds. The cover story was that they were merely flares from the military training flights. Arizona governor at the time,
Fife Symington,
initially jokingly dismissed the event. Later on in 2007 interview, he changed his story and said, "I suspect that unless the Department of Defense proves otherwise, that it was probably some of the alien spacecraft." When asked about the official Air Force Pentagon explanation that they were military flares, total bunk. I have seen high altitude flares before. There is no way they were flares. It has never been explained.
And he also said he saw it himself later on.
Right.
He said he saw it. He said it was definitely not flares. That's ridiculous. And he said, unless proven otherwise, it had to have been some kind of alien craft. Right. His words. That's what he just said.
In the year 2000, we actually have the one of the first known testimonies of the secret space program 20 and back. You know, we heard about William Tompkins talking about this stuff in like 2016 about it being developed in the 80s, but here is one of our very first testimonies. So Michael Relf, if you know who he is, he was an SSP whistleblower who actually Dr. Sala did a series of interviews with him, but he no longer speaks publicly. I don't know what happened to him, but this was actually written by his daughter, Stephanie Relf, in the year 2000, the Mars Records. This was a book that you could buy. I could not find, I'm sure you could find it somewhere. This is like a PDF of it I was able to take from the internet, but this is some of the things that she said in 2000. Genetic modifications were performed on my father during his time served in the United States Air Force. I was the result of those modifications. Genetic enhancements were performed on myself at a young age. Programming was placed into me at some time to encourage me to enlist in the United States Navy. After enlistment, I was recruited for a joint human-alien black project involving tactical remote viewing. During this project, I was assigned to a Mars base. During this time, I also served as a combat pilot in a single-seat attack spacecraft of some kind. I feel that my telepathic talent was also used in this role. Additional surgical and chemical modifications were performed upon me as a result of my assignment to this project. My tactical remote viewing duties included telepathic assassination project. My involvement with this project lasted 20 years, from 1976 to 1996, which would mean that in 1976, they were at least doing the 20 and back program. During this time period, I was not permitted to visit or interact with anyone on Earth. At the conclusion of active duty in the program, I was age reversed 20 years and sent back to Earth to complete my normal timeline. Memory blocks were placed into me to prevent memory recall. Implants were placed into me to block my metaphysical abilities and track my location and movements. The result of these memory blocks was that I was negatively affected in my family life, relationships, health, and employment. And she goes on to say that her involvement continues.
It's actually called The Underground. Sorry, going back to the Phil Schneider.
Oh, it's just
it's called The Underground.
The Underground.
Yeah.
Okay. It's Phil Schneider documentary on Amazon Prime called The Underground.
The Underground.
So either way, guys, this is a secret space program testimony from the year 2000, the Mars records. And we have people coming out in 2014 claiming that they invented some of these terms that were already being talked about in the year 2000. So obviously there's some sort of agenda there behind that. In the year 2001, we have the Disclosure Project National Press Club 2001 public hearing. And I'm sure you guys know about this with Stephen Greer put this on. Dan Willis was one of the presenters at this event. On May 9th of 2001 at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., Dr. Stephen Greer assembled more than 20 military, intelligence, government, corporate, and scientific witnesses who joined together for a very deliberately public press conference, recorded at the time by several major media outlets, also watched by hundreds of thousands of webcasts live around the globe. These incredibly brave individuals share their personal firsthand testimony on experiences with real UFOs and other related encounters with extraterrestrial life forms. They also discuss at some length the current state of working knowledge regarding exotic extraterrestrial flying vehicles, as well as their radically advanced energy and propulsion technologies. This extremely credible panel of diverse professionals gathered together on stage under the united banner of the Disclosure Project. So this is 2001. Guys, we've been talking for over 2.5 hours. Listen to everything we've said and compiled. I mean, if you just choose to ignore all of this stuff, at that point, you're just choosing to not believe it. Yeah.
Right. At some point, it's willful ignorance, and
right.
You just don't want to believe.
And if that wasn't enough, Gary McKinnon in 2002, a computer hacker named Gary McKinnon performed the largest military hack against the United States government in history. His system scanned over 65,000 computers belonging to the NSA, NASA, the CIA, etc. McKinnon claims that he was looking for evidence of free energy suppression and a cover-up of UFO activity. He says the files he saw prove the government not only hides the fact that aliens exist, but multiple species actually work alongside various governments worldwide. And here are some of the claims that he made. In Building 8 at Johnson Space Center, there is someone whose job is to only airbrush UFOs from images since they are so commonly captured. He found that out. He found out a U.S. Navy spreadsheet entitled Non-Terrestrial Officers. During his hack, he discovered this. McKinnon admits these words can be interpreted in various ways, but one thing is for sure, given the name, we know they're not based on Earth. McKinnon says there were maybe 25 rows on the Excel spreadsheet with officers, ranks, and names, and the ships that had the prefix USS, just like American sea vessels. He claims evidence of material transfer between ships, of which he guesses there are possibly 8 to 10. McKinnon says all of this points to evidence that the USA has warships in space, which might account for why the Bush administration were so keen to have him incarcerated in the States. So, and there's a lot more information that came from his hack, even photograph of a cigar-shaped craft that was then scrubbed from his computer once they realized where the source of the hack was coming from. He wasn't able to actually.
Yeah, they freaked out when he did this hack because this was.
So he literally
extremely secret stuff people aren't supposed to know about, and
he hacked it and found hardcore, solid evidence of a secret space program.
Yeah.
And then in 2004, we have the patent application for the triangular spacecraft, otherwise known as the TR-3B, unconventional spacecraft propulsion systems. So basically an anti-gravity craft. This application was applied for in 2004, and then it was abandoned after 2006. So it never became operable. And then obviously, I've personally seen one of these craft actually in March 2nd of this year, or of last year now. I had one fly directly over my house. And
I still have your audio text.
Right.
Sent me.
And Alora of 1 foot and 5D, she has footage of one she caught from Dimensions of Disclosure.
Dimensions of Disclosure 2019, which I was at.
Right.
Yes. She was filming the moon or something, or what was she filming?
No, she saw another light in the sky.
Oh, she was filming another UFO or another light.
And when she reviewed the footage,
and didn't see it with her own eyes, but then when she reviewed the footage, it was on the video. And
so anyway,
so she got one.
We have an actual patent filed that literally shows this craft and talks about an unconventional propulsion system. So anyway, you can go ahead and read this one, Aaron. This is 2009.
Yeah, Paul Hellyer. So he was an ex-Canadian Minister of Defense. An ex-Minister of Defense in Canada is saying this stuff. Come on. So he says there are 4, and again, this is all he knows about. There's obviously way more than 4, but it's all compartmentalized. It says there are 4 alien races that are actively visiting Earth. Direct quote here: from time to time, aliens have interfered with the control systems of nuclear missile launchers on Earth. The aliens conducted an inventory of Earth's events. They have a complete picture of what is happening on the planet. And believe me, they are not amused by what they see. I think they look at us and think the kids are playing with matches.
Right. Yeah. So that was, and then he had been talking about that for a number of years, not just 2009, but that's when he first started talking.
Yeah. Around that time is when he was really, started speaking out a lot.
Right. And then if you need more proof, in 2016, a patent was applied for a craft using an inertial mass reduction device. A mass reduction device is technology that is installed in the hull of a craft that reduces the mass of the object as it approaches the speed of light, because they decided that the speed of light was unachievable because as it increased in speed, it increased in mass, therefore it can never actually achieve the speed of light. So they developed a reverse engineered a technology, which is used on the TR-3Bs and other craft, that actually reduces the mass.
Oh, sorry. It was Contact in Desert 2018 when Alara got that, which I was also at, actually. Okay. So
there you go.
So there you go.
It actually reduces the mass of the ship so it can achieve the speed of light. And this patent was not abandoned. It was actually granted in 2018, and it is now operable, and it doesn't expire until 2036. And this was actually released by the U.S. Navy. This was made public in 2016. So we have actual evidence, an actual patent, operable patent of this technology being used to help achieve the speed of light, if you didn't believe it was true. And we're going to jump to 2017. The New York Times releases the Tic Tac, the fuzzy Tic Tac that we all know about. And this is where it just starts getting hilarious. So, I mean, we just laid everything out for you guys, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. Each slide could have been its own presentation. There's a lot we left out. But in 2017, we get this report of the Tic Tac. We also get information about glowing auras and black money, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program. Basically, it says that the Pentagon since 2007 has been and still is conducting a $22 million UFO study chasing program that involved contractors like Bigelow Aerospace, which provided locations and bases to house the wreckage of the UFOs, which, as we know, have been shot down by the military with various retro-engineered technology since the late 40s. It goes on and on and on. But either way, so
the government's spending millions of dollars to study something that's not supposed to exist or be anything, just weather anomalies and blah, blah, blah. But they have this program that they've been studying it for years. And
so we have all this information.
Seems a little contradictory.
So we have all this information. They give us this fuzzy tic tac. They tell us about a $22 million program that has since been shut down, according to them.
It has not. No.
So here's just another screenshot of, U.S. Navy describes seeing.
But it's the limited hangout disclosure. Right. They're trying to get ahead of things and steer us in a direction. Keep a tight lid on it. Like, oh, this is all that we know about. Keep everyone focused on this one thing.
And we're all waiting for this report in 2017. And guess what? Guess what? The report is from a sighting in 2004.
Right.
So
2004.
Yeah. So they're telling you about 2004. And then in 2018, for some reason or another, there's a model of this Haunebu 2 flying saucer in Germany they decided to take off the shelf because it suggested Hitler's scientists successfully built a spaceship.
Yeah, so which they did.
But this is something important to note. Why would they decide in 2018 to pull this off the shelf? Because guess what was also happening in 2018? All of the secret space program testimonies and information was surfacing. So now, if that wasn't true, they had no reason to pull this toy off the shelves. Either way, it's interesting. And then in 2021, the U.S. intelligence community releases the long-awaited UFO report, and it's a big nothing burger. Guys,
it says literally
this is evidence of them trying to erase history, trying to erase everything we just told you about. In the report, it literally says the limited amount of high quality reporting on unidentified aerial phenomenon hampers our ability to draw firm conclusions about the nature or intent of a UAP. The limited amount of high quality reporting. That's bullshit. The first sentence of the report. So they're saying there's not enough high quality reporting to accurately draw conclusions about the nature or intent of UAPs. It goes blah, 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 bullshit. It even brings up a weather balloon potential again. And then it says available reporting largely inconclusive. Limited data and inconsistency in reporting are key challenges to evaluating the UAP. So they're acting like they can't even provide us with a report because they have limited data and inconsistencies in reporting. They are literally it's an actual joke.
It's an actual joke.
They are trying to erase history. This is a laughing stock, and they're making a mockery of the UFO subject. And then, I mean,
because they can't tell us what's really going on because they're a part of the control system and the cover up, and for multiple reasons they can't disclose. They would tell on themselves, and they would have to tell the fact that they know about advanced ETs and technology that would change our whole planet forever and bye-bye control system.
Right.
So of course they're not going to tell us. Of course the control system isn't going to tell us things that are going to make the control system obsolete. So
and then kind
of a no-brainer.
You guys know who Robert Earl White is. He actually was given information on what was supposed to be included in this report. Not the bullshit that we got. He got a copy of the report that was supposed to be released, and this is him explaining it on our show. This is just a brief clip from that.
But the new reality coming from Congress and the UAP task force is UFOs are real. And technically, I have a leaked memo from Dr. Maccabee. Bruce Maccabee, retired Navy physicist. He sent about 15-page article to the UAP Congress hearing that they were having, and it was read by Congress. It was sent to Washington, D.C., and they were supposed to, back in June 25th, they boosted it. It was supposed to be June 20th. They moved it to June 25th. They scooted it forward. Originally, I have inside people that know people, and the same people you see on the news talking about the subject. I got people that know. And the original terminology they were supposed to use and deliver this to the public, word for word, was NHI, non-human intelligence that was going to be what was told to the public, quote unquote. What the Congress was supposed to tell the public is that some UAP are operated by NHI. This was their watered down terminology they are supposed to be using.
And they're not.
They left it out. And Luis Elizondo and Jeremy Corbell, Tom, and so many others that read this memo sent to Congress. You know, I have it. I have the Word document, and I've shared it, and no one cares about it. I've shared it on the internet, and no one cares about it. It's Dr. Nice. Bruce Maccabee. People don't know Dr. Bruce Maccabee. The guy has 8mm films of UFOs that the Navy have recorded. I'm friends with his wife. Him and his wife haven't even watched it because they're preserving it for true disclosure. Then they'll release it. Very much kind of like the Amendment and all that. Like, people have no idea the evidence of that. It's just being, you know, waiting for the right time. And all of this stuff is out there. And that's why the UAP community and ufologists were so disappointed with the report. Of course, we know they can't say everything.
It was a big nothing burger,
yeah.
Actually, they said more back in '67, or I believe it was '67 during the recent panel.
That's what we talked about. I said they released this report as if there's no UFO history at all. But like, Roswell never happened. None of these. So, guys, this presentation continues on, but we're not going to continue on. We've been going long enough. And the next part is actually, it's not part of the timeline. It's something else I prepared for a presentation I did at another conference. But thank you guys so much. I realize we've kept you for a long time. We've been up here for a long time. We really hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please share this with your friends and family. Please share this with everybody you know if you feel like if this will apply to them. We put a lot of work into this, and they're trying to erase history, and we're not going to let that happen. So we thank you guys, and thank you guys all for the donations.
So talk about the Patreon. So we just launched our Patreon, as many of you know. So we're going to be doing many more webinars, just like not just like this topic, but we're going to be doing similar style webinars on our Patreon now, which is $5 a month. So we try to make it, you know, hopefully everyone can afford that, as many people as possible. And we're going to have webinars. So if you like this one, we're going to have a lot more on there. And we're also going to have other bonus content, videos on various topics that each of us individually are going to make, and just whatever extra stuff. And that, which we talked about at the beginning, the documentary that was filmed at our conference, at our secret space program themed conference last year. There was a Dutch film crew that came out and filmed for a TV show.
So that documentary will be available on our Patreon as of tonight.
Tonight I will put that on there, and so it's really, really good. Like, I highly recommend.
It's amazing. They came out from the Netherlands and literally filmed a documentary of our very first conference, and they did the secret space program a lot of justice. It was very well put together. You can't just go and watch it online, because you need a VPN that's assigned, that's set to the Netherlands to even watch it, and you have to have a password. It's not accessible in the United States. So we have taken that documentary and put it on our Patreon. It includes a lot of presenters that were at the conference, including some of the attendees. It's a fantastic documentary, and that will be available also as exclusive content on our Patreon. So you don't have to jump through all the hoops to watch it with the VPN and the password and all that stuff.
So yeah, guys, sign up for that.
And
we're not, and it's not about the money. Like, the money is just so we can spend our time putting this kind of content together, because otherwise we just wouldn't have the time to do it. You know, basically, like, that's all it's about.
And obviously the podcast is going to continue for free.
The podcast is going to continue normally for free.
This is just something for anyone who just wants to dive deeper with us on some of these subjects. Right. I will tell you the next one I have planned to do is a Voice of God technology webinar. I have a lot of information on that I'd like to share. And I think that one I might do solo. Either way, this is just kind of to give you an idea of what to expect on the Patreon. If you guys feel inclined to sign up for that, go for it. If not, no big deal. We're still going to be here every week doing the podcast also. And we love all you guys. Thank you
We
so
love you
much.
all. You're all amazing. Thank you so much.
Right.
And have a wonderful night, guys. We love you.
Right. And I'm not ending this yet because I have to get to the page where I
Because you have to find
right, yeah,
how to end it.
wherever screen is to end this.
Hey, what's up, Dylan?
Yeah, thank you guys for the donations, and
Thank you guys for the donations. You're amazing.
Thank you guys
so
for
much.
hanging out with us.